I'm going to say right off the bat, this was a bad idea because this list that we're about to go through today, I'm going to have nightmares thinking about who I had to leave off. And to compile a top 10 most influential people in NFL history is unbelievably difficult. I mean, Mark, we had to go through categories, like at least with defensive players of all time, quarterbacks, like you're dealing with one specific set. We're talking owners, commissioners, coaches, players, you name it. This is not easy.
It's not easy, but I think it's fun. And one of the things we were just talking about here before we started recording is I almost wanted to hear your list before we started. I've been thinking about the list because I'm like, when we do a lot of these lists, just to peel back the curtain of the podcast, we don't confer. And part of the reason doing this list is I thought, okay, this would be really interesting because I have a feeling you're going to get a lot of variations. And then when you start doing the research about the history of the league and how, and it started becoming really clear to me, the NFL is king, right? The NFL is number one in the United States and really globally, you could argue, besides soccer, like, I mean, the NFL is the biggest global sport. And you start saying, okay, well, if you think about all the people that have ever been in and around the NFL, how did it get to where it is now? It becomes pretty obvious. There should be some names that it's like, okay, they obviously have to be on the list. So part of me was like, I want to see your list. Then I was like, nope. We have to, for our listeners' sake, no matter how crazy it gets, be surprised by whoever we put on each other's list. I'm firm with you. I said this before we started. I think there are 3 people that they're not in your top 10, and they are my number 1, 2, and 3. That I'm confused. You'd have to really explain to me how they're not 3 of the most important people to why the NFL is the way it is today. So that's the list. Top 10 people that have shaped to why the NFL is number 1, what the NFL is today. And I can't wait to jump into it.
Yeah, we're still trying to kind of figure out what to call this list because it's it kind of transcends one single definition of anything. You could say influence, you could say impact, you could say create, you could say just
I don't like
what was part of the makeup of the league in general. I mean, there's a lot of different things.
I think shaping is the best way, not creating, because to me, even though a lot of these people are dead, you know what I mean? These people are gone, but I think they are still influenced, and the shape of the league, the way the league is the number 1 thing in sports in this country. And these are the 10 people that got it to where that is today. And it's continued success even on, because there are some modern names that you'll hear on this list from me and a bunch in the honorable mention. That it's like, no, the continued success of the future of the league, this person is, these couple of people are also really important, even though they weren't there when the league was created in the 20s and the 30s. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, maybe, the most impactful figures.
Yeah.
Because that can kind of encapsulate everything that there is about shaping the league in
absolutely
the way it is. So that can work for sure. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting this episode underway for sure.
Also, just a shout out to some of our listeners that have been bugging one. What I drink during the show. If you notice, I'm addicted. It's the summertime, and literally over the past month of my life, addicted to Crystal Light. When the weather turns, it's like vanilla ice cream and Crystal Light. I could survive off it all summer long. I'm serious.
Good stuff right there. No, I love a good lemonade in the summertime. No question about it.
It's
easy on the go.
It's what I chug literally all day and during the show as well.
Well, and it's good because no carbonation, so you don't have to worry about burping on the air. So
it's true. That's very true. Early on in my radio career, I made that mistake.
Yeah,
because have
a Coke during the.
I'm a big soda person too. I try to cut out as much as I can, but that it's deadly while you're trying to talk in the microphone.
It really can be. A couple things to touch on real quick before we get into this list, Marcus. We're going to dive head first in a second. Not much new other than the Baker Mayfield rumors continue to spread, and that rumor mill remains heated.
Yeah.
Something's going to happen. I think we'd agree by the end of this deal, by come training camp. But that's there's really nothing new to report on that front other than it looked like for a time Seattle, like there were some rumors saying Seattle was getting real close to making a deal. And then, this Jimmy Garoppolo, he's going to start throwing soon. And if things look good and teams are convinced that he's got it, then, maybe that kind of jumps into the conversation for Carolina or Seattle as well.
To me,
there's no way the 49ers are going to give him to Seattle.
To me, that's the most fascinating part of this whole storyline. You kind of forget it. You're sleeping on Jimmy Garoppolo and his importance of coming back. Because, again, it's surgery on his throwing shoulder. It's not non-throwing. It is throwing shoulder. So what does he look like now that he's healthy and he's throwing the ball again, and what the timetable is? You know what I mean? Can he start taking hits? Is he going to actually be ready for the start of the season? Because a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo becomes really enticing for some of those teams that don't want to bottom out. You know what I mean? Like Carolina doesn't give you the vibes that it wants to bottom out. Atlanta does. Some other teams are giving you, maybe Cleveland, like, depending with Watson, like Cleveland does not want to bottom out and they can't turn to Baker Mayfield. So all of a sudden Jimmy Garoppolo becomes hugely important to Cleveland. I think Jimmy would welcome a year in Cleveland with that roster to have a chance to do something like that. So really, really interesting. And I agree. Baker will be wearing a different uniform by the start of the season. It's just a matter of time. And I think Jimmy is that next hinge. I think people are waiting for Jimmy. And then once you get word on if San Francisco is going to keep him or move him, that then Baker Mayfield's market opens up after Jimmy.
No doubt. We're waiting to hear the Deshaun Watson situation. So we'll probably have more news next week or the week after. He's going to meet again and figure out what that situation is. Alvin Kamara may be dealing with a suspension coming up as well.
He will be.
We got to keep our eyes on.
That was one of those offseason storylines that kind of got swept under the rug. I mean, literally, his issue with the domestic violence and everything that went into it. It definitely will be a suspension, probably 6 games. And for the Saints team, again, that is in that weird spot where it's like they are very much a playoff contender. If they're all healthy and starting together, that's a huge blow. They're not a playoff contender in the AFC, but in the weak NFC, the Saints certainly are a huge blow for them, losing him for 6 weeks.
Yeah. Tough pill to swallow for New Orleans as they get ready for this next chapter in their franchise's history. And finally, some sad news before we get into this one, but it is applicable since we are talking about impactful figures in the NFL. The first Black starting quarterback in NFL history, Marlon Briscoe, passed away today at the age of 76. He was a Broncos draft selection in the 14th round in 1968 and made his start on October 6th, the historic start there. So certainly etched his name in the
think about that
history books in NFL history, playing still pre-merger during the AFL years. So
the NFL had been going on at that point in time for almost 40 years and, over 40 years. And you had not had a Black starting quarterback. Pretty incredible. Sad to hear his passing. But yeah, in a weird way, we didn't, obviously it's timed out, it's tragic loss, but this is a unique episode we could dedicate in honor of certainly his memory of that. Hey, we're going to go back and look a lot of like, what are the most important things in the history of the league? And you could very much make the argument he deserves to be on that honorable mention list because of being able to break that color barrier at the most important position in all sports.
Yeah, very true. I mean, we're still talking about it to this day. And just
the issue of the Black quarterback. You're absolutely right. Dan, can I just say quickly before we jump into it, last thing, and it's probably why we didn't lead the show with it, because I think we both feel this way. Gronk playing this year, yes or no?
I'm gonna go no.
Really?
I don't think. I just don't see him making this retirement statement that he did. Um, at this point in the offseason.
Yeah,
Now, I know that they were talking about, hey, if Tom Brady calls, they've already, I mean, these guys are pretty close. Like, they've already
they
talked,
talk.
so like, I don't, something really catastrophic would have to happen, I would think, especially because it's not like they have a terrible tight end room.
Yeah.
Cameron Brate and OJ Howard are pretty solid, 1-2 tandem.
Yeah.
If both went down, but if I was a betting man, I just don't think that will happen. And so I don't think Gronk plays
Yeah,
this year because of
I'm
that.
giving it about a 30% chance he'll play. I know maybe that's a little high, but I think there's
No, I think that's
certainly
fair.
there's certainly come, post Thanksgiving around that time. I think Gronk seriously has zero desire to be in camp and to do that work. And I think Gronk probably had a conversation with Brady. And my guess, it went something like, listen, my body, if I rest it from now to Thanksgiving, I might be able to give you a 8-week run. You know what I mean? Like, hey, here's 90% of me in my prime. So the only way to do that properly in my league standards without like tampering or whatever would be to officially retire and then to come on back. Cause you can't just be like, no, I'm not playing. You know what I mean? And then like how that all works in respect to Tampa and all that stuff. So I have a feeling there's about a 30% chance if there's injuries and if he's feeling good and the Bucks are, battling for a 1 seed and it looks like, hey, if things are on high energy, there certainly could come back for a playoff run for sure.
Yeah, that's a wait and see approach. But if this is it for Gronk,
yeah,
first ballot Hall of Famer, he'll go in with Ben Roethlisberger in 2027.
That'd be a cool class.
That would be pretty awesome. I mean, we'll do our top tight ends list at some point, but he's the greatest tight end of all time, just given he did everything so well. There are some that were the best receiving threats. There are some that were amazing blockers and fit schemes well. There were the Mike Ditkas who kind of engineered the vertical threat type of deal, but man, Gronk in his prime, not much better than that. All right, let's get into this list of the most impactful players in NFL history.
People.
Most impact. Yeah, I'm sorry, I said players. Most impactful people in NFL history, and it's a top 10 list that we did. We're gonna go 10 through 6 today, and we're gonna save the top 5 for next week. So we're gonna split this up, give these people the due time that they deserve to discuss, and we'll throw in an honorable mention or two at the end of this episode, and then we'll give the rest of our honorable mentions, which there are many, next week as we get through our top 5. But Mark, if you want to start us off with number 10, I will.
I'm happy to do it. I don't think a ton of these guys need a ton of time. I think there are going to be a lot of self-explanatory. I will say this.
That's a fair point.
In going through this list, I think the thing that stood out to me was wanting diversity. And honestly, I think the shocking thing is of the 10 most impactful people in NFL history, only 3 of them for me are players. So I'll give that spoiler alert now. And that it seems like that might be too low, and maybe it is. But I feel like if I was doing this for the NBA, there'd be more players. Like the NBA is such more of the NFL, just the shaping and the deals to make it what it is, this empire of dominance. There are coaches and behind the scenes people that are really important. So I'll start number 10. The only commissioner on my list comes in at 10, Paul Tagliabue. Obviously, a lot of big names in the commissioner world. To me, maybe it's biased because whenever I think of the NFL commissioner, he's my commissioner because I fell in love with the NFL at like an 8-year-old kid, 9-year-old kid in the early 2000s and those drafts with Paul Tagliabue. Very different from Roger Goodell. even very different from the Pete Rosells and the people that preceded him as well. But I think Tagliabue did such a great job of shaping the modern NFL. He was the commissioner from 89 to 2006. And Tagliabue oversaw the NFL from that kind of AstroTurf, wild, crazy, kind of Wild West type of NFL to billion-dollar franchises, TV deals, and really important, 17 new stadiums he built in modernizing the NFL and the in-stadium feel. Also, the other two things he's well known for, and I think, again, shape what we talk about as the modern NFL, why it's successful. The salary cap. I know players hate it, but it's what makes the NFL a little unpredictable, a little more turnover of who teams can win it every year. Elevating good franchises that know how to work the salary cap, the Rams, you know what I mean, where they get all this money from.
And it kind of paves the way for free agency.
It paved the way for free agency, and also he was really hard on substance abuse. The NFL, a little bit of you look in the early 80s and through that time, there was some sketchiness about these players and the size and the speed and the juice being an issue, obviously, in baseball. NFL has always avoided kind of that major steroid scandal and having clean players, and that is directly related to Paul Tagliabue. I think that of all the commissioners, again, maybe it's bias. I wanted one commissioner on this list. To me, I didn't want to overload of commissioners because you could bog it down. To me, Roger Goodell has a chance to pass him, but I think it would need to be. He's still third on the list to me of commissioners behind Pete Rozelle just because of all the other stuff. It's hard to leave him off, but Tagliabue, the one commissioner, and I'll put him in at number 10.
I only have one commissioner as well, but we'll get to that. And not here at number 10, that is for sure. I will say, just a quick tangent. I've always wondered this because it's hard for me to believe that the NFL is not riddled with steroids. There's just, to me, there's a way that either the league is kind of not making a big deal out of steroids, right? And it's kind of an unspoken. I mean, look at these guys, man.
Yeah.
Like it's hard for me to believe that there hasn't been widespread steroid use over the years,
and there might be, but
there might not have been, but man, it's just, look at these guys and how fast they run, how hard they hit, and the linemen.
I think part of it is, I think with the NFL, it is different from baseball in the sense that steroids extended guys' careers. In the NFL, I've always, from what I've always thought about and read, was like steroids might give you an edge, but it's going to kill the longevity of your career.
Yeah, in the fourth quarter, especially, like even
the breakdown of your body. Yeah, the breakdown of your body for messing with your muscles like that. Where baseball, no, it's just going to extend your career because you hit long balls and you'll always be able to stand at first base and reach and catch for the big, you know what I mean, the big power hitters and stuff like that. So maybe that's what it has been. I also think, all right, go ahead.
No, it's a good point. It's a good point. Like the Tony Manderiches of the world who, were unbelievably huge, but just couldn't last more than a series or two in a game. For number 10 for me is the Sables, Ed and Steve Sable of NFL Films, because, and, for many reasons, as you mentioned about the variety of the list, I thought this was important because not only are they documenters of the NFL that have kept the best log of history in the league with all of their various documentaries and initiatives, they also brought the game. I think they're as influential of a group as any of bringing the game to the fans and to the people and creating a spectacle that is the NFL today. And you don't get a league like you have today without a massive fan base driven. And in an era of no social media, not easy ways to kind of market yourselves, they were incredible pioneers in terms of
absolutely
how they used film in sports and how they captured the essence of the league for which they worked. I just think it's incredible. I mean, you go and listen to the highlights of Dick Butkus, and you hear him hitting, and you're like, how in the world did they have like mic'd up, you know, in the mid to early 60s, like the technology that they used and how they were able to do it in such a fast-paced sport and volatile environments. Very impressive, and that's what got me into this sport, was watching all of those NFL
Absolutely.
films, documentaries, and stuff. So again, it's got a soft place in my heart as well. But the Sable family, for sure, absolute engineers of the NFL marketing.
I smile because my number 9 is Ed and Steve Sable as
Nice.
well.
Okay, cool.
So I had them very similarly positioned. They deserve a spot on this list, and they're the type of people that in 100, well, maybe not 100, but in like 30 years from now, if we were to redo this list, even 20, like they would still be on this list. Like I would rather move other people down and keep them at 9 and 10 and figure out a way, like they're that important. And maybe that means like, Mark, why shouldn't they be higher? It's a respect thing. Like the NFL.
Yeah.
And I'll just add on to what you said, because everything you said is perfect. One thing I'll add on is when you watch old highlights of baseball, basketball, soccer, it's not the same as the NFL. And it's because of the Sables and NFL films. Like they just were so special. And I can remember being young and my little brother and I begging my dad to add on to the cable package NFL Network so you could watch the NFL film stuff and the football life documentaries and that stuff, the preservation of the game. It's how we know a lot of these people on this list for guys born in our 30s and younger. You know, we're just, if we didn't have them, I wouldn't know the importance of some of the people who are going to be above them on this list. They deserve to be on it. So I'm glad they're on yours. So that's my number 9.
So many influential sports anthems to come out of those films too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the first note you hear, you're like, oh yeah, that's an NFL film song right there. And they got the Oakland Raiders.
The Raiders.
It's just great narration, great everything there from the Sable family. Number 9 for me. This might be a little controversial, maybe too low. Bill Walsh. Bill Walsh is on this list for me at number 9 because of his coaching tree.
Okay.
It's insane. He is one of a few coaches on here, and the only reason he's not the top coach is because of the overall impact on. I feel like the formative years of the league had a lot of coaches that bear a lot of responsibility for foundation.
Agreed.
But I thought Bill Walsh deserved to be on this because of the engineering of the West Coast, which is today still used thoroughly. So many schemes branched off of the West Coast. And again, his coaching tree is unlike any other I've ever seen. It's remarkable. I mean, we talk about Bill Belichick being the greatest coach in history. His coaching tree, not incredibly impressive. The Don Shulas of the world and things like that as well. Now he's still got some awesome coaches from him, but Bill Walsh, you go down the list, it's remarkable who he was able to influence and who became amazing coaches from his tutelage. The history with him is well documented. Don't need to say too much more, but the titles that he was able to win, he helped engineer one of the greatest offenses of all time. Gotta go with Bill Walsh.
It's interesting. All right, Bill Walsh at 9 for you. I'll go to 8 for me, and I will go with someone who, this may be controversial. I think it might be low for some people. Al Davis. Al Davis said it best, just win, baby, win. And I think Al deserves a spot on this list because of what his impact and the Raiders' impact on the AFL was. We would not have the AFC and the NFC and the Super Bowl and the greatest thing in sports without Al Davis's Raiders and him single-handedly willing and making the AFL as successful as it was. There was legitimate argument for a while in this country, is the AFL better than the NFL? And that was all because of those Raiders teams, one losing season in 20 years when he was the Jerry Jones before Jerry Jones. I mean, he general manager, owner, and commissioner of the AFL. So he deserves a spot in this list. I think he's someone that history will never forget. He's someone that is a 10 influential person. He's a little lower for me because I think the NFL would have eventually survived and gone on and figured it out without the AFL. And the AFL would not, I don't think the AFL would have eventually, and they were smart to merge. I mean, it was a brilliant merger, and it created the Super Bowl, and Al Davis and the history of the Raiders, extraordinarily important. But maybe a little lower than you'd expect on a list, but he's going to come in at number 8 for me.
I actually had him at number 8 too.
Oh, there you go, Al Davis.
And for a lot of those reasons that you mentioned, he was a pretty staunch opponent of the merger, but his actions of poaching NFL players really catalyzed the move. So in a way, he was more responsible for the merger than most others, because he really showed the flaws in the systems and how the urgent need to get this thing done, and his ability to hire coaches, his ability to coach and to own and to be one of the flagship businessmen of the league in some ways in terms of marketing a brand. He was the Jerry Jones before Jerry Jones.
Absolutely.
So that definitely makes him top 10. But I agree. It was hard because he could be a top 5 guy in certain arguments, and I wouldn't disagree. But I found other people, and I was like, I can't put these people lower. This was just kind of a place where Al Davis fell. He was a tough person to kind of slot in.
So I would, now that we both know that he's at 8 for us, and that's interesting. I think for me, why I couldn't have him top 5 is that he was against the merger. And like I talked about, like the merger is really important, but if it was up to him and purely up to him, they would have never merged. And that to me is a little bit of short-sightedness. Like, and that, well, like, that cockiness of like, I can just get it done. You're right. The poaching of players inadvertently helped speed along the merger because the NFL is like, all right, this is stupid. Let's just buy these people. Let's get this done. And if the NFL still won the idea of the merger. I mean, it's still called the National Football League. The AFL becomes the AFC, and they dissolve and they move things around. It creates the Super Bowl, and it really is an important event. But it's one of the reasons too why the NFL is so great, because in the NBA, you think it's Eastern Conference, Western Conference. You break it down to time zones. The NFL will always have those 2 New York teams, AFC, NFC. You know what I mean? This idea that, no, that remnants of that, or people being like, well, why don't they just break it up more in like geological and like, and make it like all the teams west of the Mississippi, east of the Mississippi. Well, it's because of the AFL, like that, for young people getting in the NFL and then having to learn that history. And Al Davis, maybe the most important figure of the AFL. So that's deservedly so. I'll go to number 7. And this is the only person on my list who is still actively playing. Tom Brady. Tom Brady comes in at number 7. So, listen, I had a really hard time with Tom Brady and figuring out where to go. If you're doing a player Mount Rushmore, he's top 5. I would maybe argue he's number 1. He's probably the greatest player in NFL history. But this isn't about just playing. And being the number 1 best player in NFL history, I kept saying you have to be then in the top 10 for influential and just important people, because it's just that equates. It's enough of a weight. But he falls at 7 because Tom Brady is a success story of the NFL that was already the number 1 sport in the world. The NFL, you know what I mean? Like any new person that comes along, they're going to have a hard time making it into the top 10 unless a new commissioner, a new owner, a new does something so radical to launch it into where it becomes above soccer. Players, a player or a coach, they have to overcome a lot to make this top 10, in my opinion. And I think Tom Brady's done that. Tom Brady is now, from here on out, it is a pre-Tom Brady NFL and a post-Tom Brady NFL. That to me is worthy enough of a dude deserving to be in the top 10. Every single player who comes into the league, especially the quarterback position, which is the most important position in football, will be compared to the GOAT. And he is the undisputed GOAT. 7 Super Bowls says it all. He's got the rings. And every single player, and what is the NFL about? Winning Super Bowls at its core. They now will be compared to Tom Brady. And can a player win 7 Super Bowls? Whether they're a running back, a tight end, a quarterback, a linebacker, that's the goal, to be the winningest player. He is the winningest player. He's got all the stats to back it up, and he's still going. And I think the record of seasons, the age thing, all of those have set a new benchmark. Even if eventually we get a quarterback who plays within their 50s, they're still going to be like, well, they only did it because Tom Brady showed him the roadmap to do it. He is the pioneer of that future of the NFL, and doing something that I legitimately don't think we'll ever see again, of winning 7 Super Bowls. I think he deserves on this list. I can't put him ahead of some of the pioneers, though, so he comes at 7.
It's a bit low for my taste, but
low. Okay.
It's a bit low.
I like it. Low. I like it. All right.
But you're going to say that about this next person, so that's
okay. 7. Who's 7 for
7
you?
is Vince Lombardi for me. And
wow.
Look, here's the thing. I think putting anyone in the top 10 of this list is giving them a lot of cred. I've always kind of felt like Vince Lombardi was like a little bit overrated. I think people talked him up a little bit too much. Let it be known,
the Bears fan has Lombardi higher. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
The Bears fan has Lombardi higher.
Look, here's the deal. All right, the guy won 6 titles. Kudos to him. He was the first dynasty in the league, in the Super Bowl era, and slightly before, right in that pivotal moment in league history. No question about it. Phenomenal coach, was known as the coach of all coaches. He's got a trophy named after him for a reason. Totally get all of that. The only thing was, I couldn't figure out what he did to completely just change how the game was played, or like he was a phenomenal coach, and so what people learned from how he coached certainly influenced coaching down the road. And he was a really good run play schemer, but there wasn't much revolutionizing of the game with Vince Lombardi. It was just being really talented
at the right time.
And at a very important time. With the one of the flagship programs being the Green Bay Packers. So I get all of that. He's an absolute legend. It's just, man, I found 6 people that I thought have done more for the game overall.
Yeah.
And that's why I have him at 7 here.
Again, it's one of those weird things where it's like you have to make an argument almost why they're lower when they're an all-time great, which is a stupid thing. You're absolutely right. Vince Lombardi is a top 10. He should be in everyone's top 10. He's in mine. He's in yours. That's all that really matters. It is a little preference. I think you make a really great point. I think the reason he's higher mine, I'm not going to spoil where he is I'll get to it when we talk about it. I have my reason, and I think, again, that's a little bit of preference, but we're both right in the fact that we got that right. He belongs in the top 10.
Like I will say, it's basically the 6 titles, like his winning is what put him ahead of Bill Walsh, because otherwise, I'd say Bill Walsh, if he had 6 championships, I might put him ahead because of the coaching tree and the creation of an offense that has lasted 3 decades plus.
We'll have to wait to see where and if I have Bill Walsh on the list.
We'll see.
It. I think my last point on that before we move on is again, we said at the start of this, off air and recording, to me, there are 3 names that have to be on this list. We both established, we both have Vince Lombardi. So we're 1 for 3 to me. There are 3 names I think that need to be on the list. I don't think that I'm not giving away. That doesn't mean that Vince is in the top 3 for me. I'm just saying it is one of those 3 names and he's on it. So there's no bloodbaths right now. All right, my final pick of this episode, number 6 overall, is my favorite player in NFL history. I think he is a player that deserves to have the lasting legacy that he has and deserves to be top 10. That's Walter Payton. Walter Payton is a top 10 person in NFL history. And a lot of people will say, okay, well, Mark, you only have 3 players on this list, and now I've revealed I have 2 of them. Brady 7, Walter 6. I couldn't put Brady ahead of Walter. And I had a hard time putting another player over Walter because Walter, there's a reason it is the Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year. And the NFL tells you simply and straightforward, this is the highest honor we have, and it is the most important thing. And I think as time goes on, you see those awards mean more for even like Hall of Fame cases and things like that. It is a prestigious thing. The NFL understands the idea of giving back to communities, being at the heart of communities. It's one other thing that Paul Tagliabue, I didn't mention when I was talking about him. He really pushed and revolutionized like youth sports with football and like getting it safe and the growth of youth. Like it is as Americana and giving back on those Friday night lights and what the players do to try to earn that honor and being deserving of that. Walter Payton, he was the epitome of being a superstar, but not living like Deion Sanders, who was a superstar at like the same time. You know what I mean? And that's not a knock at Deion. Deion's done a ton of great giving back. And look what Deion's doing with the historically black colleges now. I mean, he's talking about a good dude, but I'm trying to say, like the living the lifestyle in that way. Walter Payton was a larger than life player. I think if I made a players, like the best players in NFL history, he is on my Mount Rushmore of players. So he belongs in this list for me in that way as well. He was, to me, he's the greatest, talentedest running back of all time. One of the most important positions in NFL history. At a time when he played, carried the Bears to a Super Bowl victory with that defense. And again, there's a reason they gave out the Man of the Year award well before Walter Payton. There are winners of the Man of the Year award all the way back to the 1930s. They renamed it after him, deservedly so, because that's the kind of human being he was and forwarding the game of football. And his legacy is lasting beyond his early tragic passing of cancer. Walter Payton, to me, deserves to be on this list and is at it at 6 for me.
Yeah, it's a bummer that he's not still around because, like,
absolutely
the things he'd be able to talk about. I mean, he'd be a media, dynamite superstar. It is unfortunate, and he absolutely has a huge place in the history of the league.
And he is the epitome. And I mentioned it when we did our top running backs. We talked about it. Like the reason I had him over Jim Brown was because Walter Payton is the epitome of that guy. You imagine Walter Payton in today's NFL. Jim Brown is more of a bigger bruiser.
Whoa. So did you just give away? You don't have Jim Brown on this list? Is that
I'm not.
What you're giving away here?
I didn't say that. I just
said. Well, you said you have him over Jim Brown.
I just
so that
said.
Means...
I did. No. I said when we did our running backs list, I did talk about Walter.
Oh, okay. I got it.
Being over Jim Brown. I'm just saying. Yeah. I'm just saying. Walter Payton. Yeah, he's special.
He is. He has sweetness for a reason. 6 for me is Jim Brown, the man that he broke his record so many years later. Jim Brown is this. I really wanted Jim Brown to make the top 5, and just could barely. He barely missed out on it. And because I'd always said that he's on the Mount Rushmore, but then when I thought about this list, Mount Rushmore's only got 4, right?
Yep.
And so I guess that means that he's not on the Mount Rushmore, which is hard for me to square. But obviously, the guy was the first clear greatest player ever at that time, at that point in time. There's like just no question his dominance was unparalleled. It was a sight to be seen during a time where he had to deal with all of the racial tensions. He wasn't a guy that broke the racial barrier, but he was a guy who was really outspoken. You know, he was like a Muhammad Ali-esque figure in the league at that time. Super important
Yeah.
figure. Um, it hurts me to put him at 6, to be honest with you. It's tough to even rationalize, and we'll kind of just have to get that with the
It
top
is.
5, and I'll make my case, and we can see kind of where we're at that point. It's you know, you
I'm
could absolutely make
fascinated.
the argument he's in there.
I'm
What?
fascinated by the top 5s now. You start to see names eliminated, and I'm looking at what I have left.
Yeah.
I'm really fascinated by the top 5.
Yeah.
This was such a fun episode. I can't wait for next week's top 5, which next week's 4th of July. We haven't talked about it just yet. We got to figure out what our recording schedule might be.
That's true. Here. That's true. Maybe we might do it the next day.
Yeah, we'll look at
like
it.
That.
I'll just say this to end a recap. I have Paul Tagliabue. I had Ed and Steve Sable at 9. Al Davis, we both had him at 8. I had Tom Brady at 7, Walter Payton at 6, where you had Ed and Steve Sable at 10, Bill Walsh at 9, Al Davis at 8, Lombardi 7, Jim Brown 6. I do want to. I feel comfortable revealing 3 honorable mention that I don't think are on your list. I don't think they're in your top 5. I don't think anyone really now thinks they'd be in my top 5. So I feel comfortable. I have 3 names that I could reveal for an honorable mention without giving away too many spoilers.
And I'll give away 3 too that I don't think are groundbreaking snubs. I have a couple other snubs that are much more impactful that we're going to save for the reveal next week. But
I said I only had 1 commissioner, so I gave that spoiler away. So Roger Goodell is not on mine, and neither is Pete Rozelle. So those are 2. And again, to me, I came down to the fact that you could easily make the case that both those guys deserve to be top 10. I know a lot of people hate Roger Goodell, but again, the reason the NFL, look at the growth of the NFL from 2006 to 2022. Roger Goodell has been at the helm of that growth. And yes, he's made some ridiculously bad mistakes. And that's honestly why he's not on this list for me. Bad mistakes as far as managing things in moments when you need a leader to step up and be strong and have strong opinions and make decisions. I think he's been a little weak even with the Dan Snyder stuff. You saw what the NBA did to Donald Sterling. So I think he's had some mishaps, and that's why he can't be top 10 for me. And with Pete Rozelle, it's really hard leaving Pete off, but I think there was other things. The league was set up for him, the growth, and he took it over at a time when the growth was easier to manage. There was a lot less you had to deal with as far as social media, social justice, changing of other things like that. And I do think the AFL-NFL merger, it was kind of a no-brainer in a lot of ways. And, a lot of people give him credit for that. And again, if you put him on your list, and I think he's going to end up being on your list, I'm not going to argue hard against that. Finally, I will say the other one I feel comfortable revealing, and it's someone it is tough for me to do a list without him because I just fought for him so hard. Dick Butkus. He's not on my list. Dick Butkus didn't make it, but he is very close.
Yeah, I mean, guy created a position that basically, 3 for me. Jerry Jones is one of them.
Yeah.
Who obviously probably one of the best businessmen in league history. Redefined how you brand a team and how you make a business out of it. Own personal deals within a stadium, like how you go about building a stadium and monetizing a stadium, and a team. Definitely had a lot of influential aspects in that regard of the game. But the guy just doesn't produce championships as a team owner, and to me that's a big part of what you're supposed to do. He had one really good hire with Jimmy Johnson and was able to get those then. But for the branding they have done not a whole lot of winning since then, but still a snub nonetheless because of how huge a part he was in terms of he'll go down in league history for sure. The other was the Rooneys, and I kind of I kind of tied them to Bill Nunn as well, because Bill Nunn was probably the most influential person in scouting, and the first to really go after those HBCUs and find hidden talent that no one else was willing to go to. A guy that wrote columns for years about them before he even got his opportunity, and of course the Rooneys for the Rooney Rule, and them being able to create the stability they have as an organization who didn't do a lot of winning for about 20 years, and then went on to only have 3 head coaches over the last 55 plus. So an important family there, no question. And then the final one I'll throw in there was Jim Thorpe. And that was mainly because he was a primary figure in the most early days of the league in helping promote the league. The first league president back in 1922, I believe it was. But he wasn't around long enough, and he did buy a couple teams and tried to make even the competitive league at a time. So there was it was tied into a lot, and within 10 years he was kind of out of the.
He did great things for the NFL, and then he also tried to undermine the growth of the NFL.
Sabotage it, essentially,
in a lot of ways. But Jim Thorpe's one of those really, really important figures in the early days, and the NFL probably.
If you want to talk about figures of athletes of all time, he's in that conversation.
Yeah, but he did some off the field stuff post in his business career that was detrimental for sure. The beginning of the NFL too was a little bit like the Wild West. You have to understand there was a lot of people coming in, and there was a lot of people that had importance, but they're not going to make this list because it was really short-lived, or they just did kind of one thing.
Yeah, for sure. It was like
I can't wait for
specialization. Yeah, the top 5 is going to be fascinating, man.
Yeah.
For sure. So, yeah, and to recap, mine was the Sables, Bill Walsh, Al Davis, Vince Lombardi, and Jim Brown. So, Vince Lombardi and Jim Brown outside of the top 5. How about that? Never would have thought I'd see it. But, yeah, that was a fun one. We'll wrap up the next one next week. And, we'll probably end up doing it the 5th. So everyone have a really good 4th of July weekend. Stay safe as always. Enjoy some fireworks, and we will see you back here next week.